Hey everybody, it's Holly. I thought today I would start a new series. We're going to be looking at Management Series Volume 1. We're going to go over the Data Series, which is Hubbard's way of investigating and finding issues. Chris did a great video on the Data Series, breaking it all down. But in this one, I plan on actually reading the policy letters, obviously, and just kind of seeing what they say and going along the way. So we're just going to see what happens. So we go to page 3. This is the HCO policy letter of the 26th of April, 1970. This was revised the 15th of March, 1975. This is Data Series 1 revised, called The Anatomy of Thought. There are many types of thought. Unless one knows these types, he can make serious errors on administrative lines. In the unpublished work Excalibur, most of which has been released in HCOB's policy letters and books, there was an important fundamental truth. This was, sanity is the ability to recognize differences, similarities, and identities. Alright, the first thing I'm automatically going to do is look up the word sanity. What is the definition of sanity? The state of being sane, soundness of mind, soundness of judgment. Let's see what sane means. Free from mental derangement, having a sound, healthy mind, having or showing reason, sound judgment, or good sense. Sanity is the ability to recognize differences, similarities, and identities. I guess that could be included in sanity? But it's being free from mental derangement and having a sound, healthy mind. I think this is a bit of a stretch to say that this is all that sanity is. So I think Hubbard took a small part of it and just applied that to the whole thing without regarding the other 75% of what it is. But that's common for Hubbard. This is also intelligence. Great, you're going to make me clear the word intelligence. Capacity for learning, reasoning, understanding, and similar forms of mental activity, aptitude in grasping truths, relationships, facts, meanings, etc. Shows grade level based on the word's complexity. Sanity is the ability to recognize differences, similarities, and identities. This is also intelligence. Again, I think it's a small part of intelligence, not the whole thing. Two or more facts or things that are totally unlike are different. They are not the same fact or same object. No shit. Two or more facts or things that have something in common with one another are similar. Two or more facts or things that have all their characteristics in common with one another are identical. Semantics. In a subject developed by Korzybski, a great deal of stress is given to the niceties of words. In brief, a word is not the thing, and an object, exactly like another object, is different because it occupies a different space and thus can't be the same object. As Alfred Korzybski studied under psychiatry and amongst the insane, his mentor was William Allinson White at St. Elizabeth's Insane Asylum in Washington, D.C. One can regard him mainly as the father of confusion. I don't necessarily see why you say that. No, I myself don't know much about Korzybski. So, let's take a quick look at who Korzybski is. Polish-American independent scholar who developed a field called general semantics, which he viewed as both distant from and more encompassing than the field of semantics. Okay, well, one would have to know what semantics is. The study of reference, meaning, or truth. And he called him the father of confusion. I don't think so. This work, General Semantics, a corruption of semantics, meaning really significance or the meaning of words, has just enough truth in it to invite interest and just enough curves to injure one's ability to think or communicate. That's exactly what Hubbard's doing. It has just enough truth in it to invite interest and just enough curves to injure one's ability to think or communicate. Korzybski did not know the formula of human communication, and university professors teaching semantics mainly ended up assuring students, and proving it, that no one can communicate with anyone because nobody really knows what anybody else means. That's fucking wrong. As this modern, it was known to the Greeks, was a specialty of sophists and was also used by Socrates, penetration into culture affects all education in the West today. It is no wonder what current communication... As this modern, it was known to the Greeks, was a specialty of sophists and was also used by Socrates, penetration into culture affects all education in the West today. It is no wonder that current communication is badly strained. Schools no longer teach basic logic. That's absolutely wrong, and with basic logic, we can find out that your group is bullshit. Due to earlier miseducation in language and no real education in logic, much broken down think can occur in high places. And obviously, Hubbard's going to have the solution to this, so why don't we see what he has to say. A system of thinking derived from a study of psychotics is not a good yardstick to employ in solving problems. Yet the thinking of heads of states is based on illogical and irrational rules. I'd like to know what he means by this. So he's saying heads of states are illogical and irrational? Seems like a strong claim, with nothing to back it up. Populations, fortunately less well-educated, are assaulted by the irrational, kooky thinking of governments. Not necessarily irrational. This thinking is faulty mainly because it's based on the faulty logic shoved off on school children. You must study geometry because that is the way you think, is an idiocy that has been current for the past 2 or 3 decades in schools. I can't help but kind of agree with Hubbard on this part. I don't consider it faulty logic. I consider it irrelevant studies. Most people are not going to be using geometry in their life. For example, me. I'm not going to be using geometry at any point in the future. Calling it faulty logic, I think, is wrong. I have nothing against Korzybski, but the general impact of general semantics has been to give us stupefied schoolboys who, growing up without any training in logic except general semantics, are giving us problems. Again, I don't know what general semantics is. I'd have to look further into it, but I'm not gonna pull you guys down that rabbit hole as well. We're here for Scientology, and that's what we're gonna get. Increasingly, we're dealing with people who have never been taught to think and whose native ability to do so has been hampered by a false education. That's all he's doing. He's just dissing on education and calling it faulty. Just like he did with study tech. He called regular education faulty and employed his own way of teaching. At once, this gives an administrator trouble. Outside and inside his sphere of influence, he's dealing with people who not only can't think, but have been taught carefully to reach irrational conclusions. One can make a great deal of headway and experience a lot of relief by realizing the way things are and not getting exasperated and outraged by the absurdities that he sees being used as solutions. He's dealing with people who in school were not only not taught to think, but were often taught the impossibility of thinking or communicating. No one is taught the impossibility of thinking or communicating. People communicate on a daily basis. Why do you claim this is wrong when it's out in the world all the fucking time? This has a very vast influence on an administrator. Things that are perfectly obvious to him get so muddled when passed for decision to others that an administrator tends to go into apathy or despair. For instance, thank you for giving an example. It's completely logical to him that some activity must either cut its expenses or make more money before it goes broke. So he passes this on as an order demanding that the activity balance up its income-outgo ratio. He gets back a solution that they, quote, get a huge sum each week from their reserves, so they will be solvent. The administrator feels rattled and even betrayed. What reserves? Do they have reserves? So he demands to know, has this activity been salting away reserves he knew nothing about? And he receives a solemn reply. No, they don't have any reserves, but they consider the administrator should just send them money. They would have mentioned that they wanted the administrator to just send them money. The idiocy involved here is that the logic of the persons in that activity is not up to realizing that you cannot take more out of something than is in it. They are not stupid enough to want to take money out of something that doesn't exist. This would never happen. I'm getting the idea that this type of thing would never actually happen in the real world. People cut expenses all the time. And people have marketing campaigns to make more money all the time. And the activity mentioned is not alone. Today, the assets of a company are said by competent economists, unlike Hubbard, to be its property, goodwill, cash added to its debts. In short, if you have 10 pennies and owe 1,000 pounds, then your assets are 1,000 pounds and 10 pennies. Asset. That's a liability. That's not an asset. This isn't making any sense. Owing money is a liability. It's not an asset. Yes, you say that's crazy, and you're right. Yeah, you're crazy for saying this shit. For an example of modern think, the Ford Foundation is believed to have financially supported the arming of revolutionary groups so they will be dependent upon the capitalistic system and won't overthrow it, even though the revolutionary group could not exist without Ford Foundation support. A war is fought and continued for years to defend the property rights of landlords against peasants, although the landlords are mostly dead. Electronic computers are exported under government license and paid for by the exporter and shipped to an enemy who could not bomb the exporter without them in order to prevent the enemy from bombing the exporter. Hold on. I gotta reread this because this is... The Ford Foundation is believed to have financial... Okay, did the Ford Foundation financially support the arming of revolutionary groups? Or did it not? I don't want is believed to have. I want to know if they did. So they support the arming of revolutionary groups so they'll be dependent upon the capitalistic system and won't overthrow it, even though the revolutionary group could not exist without Ford Foundation support. Okay, revolutionary groups fight to defend the property rights of landlords against peasants. What does this have to do with the Ford Foundation? And what landlords are dead? There's always going to be new landlords to take up the old landlords' properties. Computers are exported under government license and paid for by the exporter. Yep, and shipped to an enemy. Why would electronic computers be shipped to an enemy? Who could not bomb the exporter without them in order to prevent the enemy from bombing the exporter. So the point is, the enemies need the computer to bomb the exporter. But bombing the exporter means no more computers. Yes, one says, that's treason. Not necessarily. It's the inability to think. I'm just going to flat out say that's wrong without technically having any knowledge of what the fuck he means. It's the result of suppressing the native ability by false systems of logic. Proper definitions. Oh, great. You mean redefinitions. People who annoy one with such weird solutions do not know certain differences. Thoughts are infinitely divisible into classes of thought. Can you explain what you mean? In other words, in thought, there are certain wide differences which are very different indeed. A fact is something that can be proven to exist by visible evidence. Fair enough. An opinion is something which may or may not be based on any facts. That's fine. Yet a sloppy mind sees no difference between a fact and somebody's opinion. In courts, a psychiatrist who's an authority says, Joe Dokes is crazy. Joe Dokes is promptly put away for 10 years, tortured, or killed. Yet this statement is just an opinion uttered by somebody whose sanity is more than suspect. The automatic problem here is you're automatically assuming the psychiatrist is wrong or crazy. You can't make these assumptions. Joe Dokes is put away. after a mental evaluation, after observing his behavior, learning about his behavior, and it becomes a fact based on the visible evidence that Joe Dokes is crazy. Or Joe Dokes has some sort of mental instability. And what's more is taken from a field psychiatry, which has no basis in fact since it cannot cure or even detect insanity. This last sentence is just completely wrong and just throws psychiatry out the window as an authority of any kind. A vast number of people see no difference at all in facts and opinions and gaily accept both as or either as having equal validity. You gave one example, a shitty example, and now assume that that's a vast number of people. I agree that there are some people who don't see, who may not see the difference between facts and opinions. Some far right or far left political people may see certain opinions and automatically assume they're facts. Like, I think Hillary Clinton's a bad person, or I think Donald Trump is a bad person. Whoever. And they may automatically assume that's a fact, just because they think it. An administrator continually gets opinions on his lines, which are masquerading as facts. If opinion instead of facts are used in solving problems, then one comes up with insane solutions. Here's an example. By opinion, it's assumed there are 3,000 pounds of potatoes available in a crop. What? You don't need an opinion for that. You can measure 3,000 pounds of potatoes. An order is therefore written and payment, $300 at 10 cents a pound, is made for the crop. One sack of potatoes is delivered containing 100 pounds. The sack was the fact. Loss is 2,900 pounds of potatoes. No, the fact is that there's 3,000 pounds of potatoes. You don't pay somebody on assumptions of the size of the crop. You know how much they have, how much to sell, and you buy it at that amount. You know you're getting that amount. Loss is 2,900 pounds of potatoes. That's fraud. That's just fraud. An administrator runs into this continually. He sends somebody to find an electric potato peeler just like the one we had. He gets back a paring knife because it's the same. Paring knives can be used as potato peelers. You don't need an electric potato peeler. The administrator orders a similar type of shirt and gets overcoats. Overcoats are different from shirts. Who's that stupid? The administrator feels he's dealing with malice, sharp practice, laziness, etc., etc. He can lose all faith in honesty and truthfulness. The actual reason he's getting such breakdowns is sanity is the ability to recognize differences, similarities, and identities. The people with whom he is dealing can't think to such a degree that they give him insane situations. Such people are not crazy. Their thinking is suppressed and distorted by modern education. Repeating what he said in the beginning. You can't really communicate to anybody because the same word means different things to everyone who uses it. In other words, all identities are different. You can communicate to anybody as long as you understand the common definition of the word that you are using. In a debate, people need to figure out common definitions in order to make an argument. And those who don't can't necessarily make good arguments if you're not basing it on the same definition. All identities are different. I don't know what he means in this case. A basic law is usually confused by students with an incidental fact. All right. We're going to look up the term basic law. Oh, didn't even copy basic law. Basic law. Basic law. Nope. Basic law meaning. In countries with uncodified constitutions, basic law is the denomination of a law providing constitutional powers. That doesn't help me. In Germany, basic law is the name given to the codified constitution. Okay, so in some cases it's the Constitution. I guess in this case he's referring to basic laws of nature and physics. A basic law is usually confused by students with an incidental fact. I don't think so. This is conceiving a similarity when one, the law, is so far senior to the fact that one could throw the fact away and be no poorer. When a student or an employee cannot use a subject he studies or cannot seem to understand a situation, his disability is that basics are conceived by him to be merely similar to incidental remarks. What is a basic? And what are the incidental remarks? What does that mean? The law, objects fall when dropped, is just the same to him as the casual example, a cat jumped off a chair and landed on the floor. The cat fell when it went down, when it dropped, but those both refer to gravity. These two are not the same for obvious reasons. Out of this, he fixedly keeps in mind two things he read. Objects fall when dropped, a cat jumped off a chair and landed on the floor. You may see these as having identical value, whereas they're similar in subject but widely different in value. If you see these having identical value, you may have a mental instability. You give this person a brief write-up on company policy. Customers must be satisfied with our service, begins the write-up. Of course, that's a law because it's been found to be catastrophic to violate it. On down the page is written, a card is sent to advise the customer about the order. The employee says he understands all this and goes off apparently happy to carry out his duties. A few weeks later, Smith & Company write and say they'll do no more business with you. You hastily try to find out why. If you're lucky enough to track it down, you find the shipping clerk sent them a card saying your order was received and we don't intend to fill it. You have the clerk in. You lay down the facts. He looks at you glumly and says he's sorry. He goes back and pulls another blooper. You threaten to fire him. He's now cost the company $54,000. He's contrite. This is a very simple example. Stuff's going to be a lot more complicated than this. If a company writes you and says that they're not going to do business with you, there's probably other reasons. They may have a competitor that has lower prices. It may not be something you necessarily did. All he understands is that life is confusing and that for some mysterious reason you're mad at him, probably because you're naturally grouchy. He would understand why you're mad at him. He did something that was wrong. What he doesn't know is what the administrator seldom taps. It isn't that he doesn't know company policy. It's that he doesn't know the difference between a law and a comment. Most people do. A law, of course, is something with which one thinks. It's a thing to which one aligns other junior facts and actions. A law lets one predict that if all objects fall when not supported, then of course cats, books, and plates can be predicted in behavior if one lets go of them. As the employee hasn't a clue that there's any difference amongst laws, facts, opinions, orders, or suggestions, he of course cannot think as he doesn't have anything to which he can align other data or with which to predict consequences. If he has a problem figuring out all this stuff, he shouldn't be working, because he's going to screw over the company. He doesn't even know that company policy is too many goofs equals fired, so when he does get sacked, he thinks somebody got mad at him. No. You explain why you're firing the person or why you're reprimanding them, so they understand it. If you think this applies only to the stupid employee, know that a whole government service can go this way. Two such services only promoted officers to high rank if they sank their own ships or got their men killed. That's stupid. Social acceptability was the only datum used for promotion, and it followed that men too socially involved, or too drunk, of course, lost battles. Whole bodies of knowledge can go this route. The laws are submerged into incidental facts. Oh, an organization, therefore, can itself be daffy if it has a concept that laws and facts and opinions are all the same thing, and so has no operating policies or laws. That's a failed organization. Whole bodies of knowledge can go this route. The laws are submerged into incidental facts. The incidental facts are held onto, and the laws never pointed up as having the special value of aligning other data or actions. An administrator can call a conference on a new building, accidentally collect people who can't differentiate amongst laws, facts, opinions, or suggestions, treating them of equal value, and find himself not with a new building, but a staggering financial loss. It's pretty obvious when you want to have a new building, you say, we want to have a new building. As the world drifts along with its generations less and less taught and more suppressed in thinking, you're suppressing a lot of people's thinking. That's why they haven't left. It will, of course, experience more and more catastrophes in economics, politics, and culture, and so go boom. As all this influences anyone in any organization, it's an important point. Personnel. In despair, an administrator enters the field of choosing personnel by experience with them. He embraces a very cruel modern system that fires at once anybody who flubs. Actually, he's trying to defend himself against some hidden menace he's never defined, but which haunts him day by day. Where are you getting this? What is this demon that you're mentioning, this hidden menace? The majority of people with whom he deals, and especially governments, cannot conceive of differences, similarities, or identities. How do you know this? Choosing personnel by experience with them. Is he choosing personnel based off of personal experience with them, or is he choosing them based off of company experience with them? He should be choosing them by their resumes and how well they're suited for the job. Like, no one acts like this. As a result, they usually can't tell a fact from an opinion because all differences are probably identities, and all identities are different, and all similarities are imaginary. A equals A equals A. Dianetics. We have a broad dissertation on this in Dianetics, the modern science of mental health, as it affects insane behavior. Everything is everything else. Mr. X looks at a horse, knows it's a house, knows it's a school teacher. I don't know what kind of engram you got going on there, but that's weird. That's not how A equals A works. So when he sees a horse, he is respectful. At least not as how I know it works from Dianetics. When anyone in an org is sanely trying to get things done, he sometimes feels like he's spinning from the replies and responses he gets to orders or requests. That's because observation was faulty or think was faulty at the other end of the comm line. Someone's trying to get things done, he sometimes feels like he's spinning from replies and responses he gets to orders or requests. Well, according to you, it may be because he doesn't understand a word. If he's feeling sort of spinny, then he may not understand something. As he tries to get things done, he begins to realize, usually falsely, that he's regarded as odd for getting impatient. The ways out. There are several ways out of this mess. One is to issue orders that demand close observation and execution. Issuance of clear orders provides no faintest opportunity of error, assumption, or default. Another is to demand that an order is fully understood before it's executed. Okay. Third is to be sure one totally understands any order one receives before one goes off to do it or order it done. Sounds just like this. Sounds like B. One is to deal only in orders and leave nothing to interpretation. There's a difference between orders, interpretation, and I don't know. But I feel like this is a false dichotomy here. I feel like he's creating two options that aren't necessarily the only answers. Another is to protest personnel on one's lines for ability to observe and conceive differences, similarities, and identities. The effective way is to get the personnel... This is going to waste so much time. Unless this has to do with hiring somebody. The effective way is to get the personnel processed. A useful way is to educate people with drills until they can think. You mean indoctrinate them, Hubbard. Another way is to defend one's areas by excluding insofar as possible adjacent areas where crippled think is rampant. It's not to exclude them, it's to possibly figure out what's going on. A harsh way is to plow under zones whose irrationality is destructive, such as psychiatry. And this is where you just throw psychiatry right out the window with no opportunity for trying to find the why, like you're going to explain to us later. Thought confusions. Wherever you have thought confusions, where fact equals opinion, where suggestion equals orders, where an observation is taken as a direction, etc., 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 an administrator is at serious risk. Misunderstoods pile up on these short circuits. Out of misunderstoods come hostilities. Out of these come overwork or destruction. The need for all discipline can be traced back to the inability to think. Even when appearing clever, criminals are idiots. They have not ever thought the thought through, except for ones who actually get away with the crime. The need for all discipline can be traced back to the inability to think. If you want to be a successful criminal, you really have to think your thoughts through. Otherwise, you're going to fail. Obviously, dumb criminals are idiots, but successful criminals can get away with shit for a while. One can conclude that anyone on management lines, high or low, is drastically affected by irrational think. Individuals to whom differences are identities and identities are differences can muddle up an operation to a point where disaster is inevitable. These are the third dynamic facts with which an organization lives daily. The fault can be very subtle so as to nearly escape close search, or it can be so very broad that it's obvious and ridiculous. But on all admin lines, the point that fails has not achieved the basic law. Sanity is the ability to recognize differences, similarities, and identities. Took me a half hour just to go through that one document. We're going to go through logic next in the next video. I can't wait to dive into the data series. I'm really looking forward to this, and I hope you guys are too. So, like if you like the video, dislike if you don't, I don't care. Comment with your questions or feedback, good, bad, or sideways, and subscribe to be kept up to date on any future content. I'll talk to all of you later. See ya.